Hey guys, Lee here with the full moon in Scorpio reading. I have so much to say about this because I am a passionate Scorpio sign lover. I have 4 planets in Scorpio and I hate almost everything that is said about the sign Scorpio. So that is where I want to begin this recording. It is the full moon in Scorpio. It's going to come exact in about a couple hours from now. And what is typically said about Scorpio? Death, sex, taboo things, creepy stuff, necrophilia, graveyards, death, 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 capital D. And that is not just inaccurate, it's not just erroneous. I think it's irresponsible. It's poor use of astrology in its long standing history that divides signs into different meanings. And there's a reason why there are 12 signs in the entire natal chart. So you can be a sun in Taurus, you could be a sun in Aries, but you have Scorpio somewhere in your chart, ruling an area of life. And indeed, a lot of the topics and the personality traits or ways of being that are scorpionic are necessary. In fact, we could really do with a lot more Scorpio in today's world, because Scorpio is absolute zero bullshit. Do not play the player. I see your game and I raise you 20 from 1 mile away. I'm always reminded, there was a guy named Grant Louis who way back in the day, I want to say about probably going on 100 years ago, wrote that Scorpio is the only sign not to have produced a shallow person. In today's world, that's fucking up to here, excuse my language, with Instagram and fake crap and checking in, and here I am in the business class lounge with my baby champagne glass. Scorpio is the antidote to all of this bullshit. Not to mention what we're facing in the political sphere. So many things could be remedied by a more Scorpio way of being. Because Scorpio is brutal. It's not obsessed with death and sex and taboo stuff. It's comfortable with it. It's difference. Yes, it's a fixed sign, so Scorpio can get fixated and a bit obsessive. That speaks to its very persistent way, its kind of dogged way of going after a target, waiting something out, strategically doing the right things. It has all those characteristics too, but it's comfortable with those topics. It's comfortable with the unpretty. And not only is it comfortable with the unpretty, it sees past the pretty. Like whatever pretty you're trying to project, like in my amazing Instagram life, living my best life, Scorpio's like, girl, I know what you're up to. I know you ain't feeling good. You ain't fooling me. Scorpio is that person that clocks somebody the first time they meet them and goes, I don't like that bitch. And you say, why? Oh my God, stop being so dramatic. And then 6 months later, you're like, I hate that bitch. Scorpio's like, yeah, welcome. Welcome to my world. Thanks for coming. Thanks for showing up. Scorpio has radar like no other. And it's intense. It's emotionally intense. It's much deeper than most signs. It goes to places that other signs won't go. But that's its strength and that's its fortitude. It's able to ride intense waves of change, trauma, revolution. Hence, some people do connect it with transformation. I think, again, I've written in the description, I think transformation is a pretty big concept to assign to one singular sign. I think all signs are capable of transformation in their own way. Probably Scorpio is really good at it in the most molecular sense, to break something down to the absolute nth degree and then rebuild. But they need that breakdown. They want that breakdown. They're not shying away from it. They're not going anywhere. They're not terrified of their feelings. Another Rob Hand quote is about Moon and Scorpio in particular, which we'll talk about. He says, Moon and Scorpio, other people aren't going to necessarily get it. And Rob Hand is the dude, if you're new to astrology. Get his books. They're brilliant. But he says, Moon and Scorpio, not everybody's going to get them or get their vibe or get what they're about. But Scorpio will always know itself. They know why they feel the way they do. They know themselves. They know why they have these feelings. It's a very, very beautiful sign. And it's something, again, to me, we need. We could all use a couple tablespoons of Scorpio right in the morning, start off our day, because where society is going is something much more people-pleasing and presentable and placating and just the opposite of what Scorpio is about. Now, that said, full moon in Scorpio, moon in Scorpio, sun in Taurus. So we're talking about the moon in Scorpio. Oh, and hey, Jackie, yes, yeah, welcome to my world, Scorpio moon. I got a Scorpio moon too, girl. Seeing you. Moon in Scorpio does have its downsides, as I'm sure I know, and I'm sure my friend Jackie in the comments is knowing too. Anybody with moon in Scorpio, there is a penetrative psychic sensibility. That is what the glyph of Scorpio looks like, that kind of M that casts out. It is indeed something a bit phallic and penetrative and sexual, but it's also the penetration of the veil, or the space between people. Between the water signs, Cancer is more gut instinct and intuition. It does rule the stomach. Pisces is more like, I love Pisces. Pisces is like synced into the energetic grid of humanity. And they have no boundaries, and it's all the stimuli are coming in. Scorpio sees. It's psychic. It's a very different way. And that's a power, and it's a pain. Sometimes with Scorpio sense of seeing, it comes too soon. Or if we're not in a settled place, if we're not grounded, if we're not in our bodies, if we've got a lot of emotions turning around, which we may be likely to do with the moon in Scorpio, but it wants to turn that stuff up and kind of get it out. That's the good part. But sometimes moon in Scorpio falls towards the side of its more negative iterations. And those are things like being defensive, being touchy. This is something I know when my husband watches this, he's going to be like, yes, he's going to like this. I'm going to see his little light come up the screen. Touchy with a capital T. And sometimes even a bit, I would say borderline paranoid, because Scorpio is both the master of having the impenetrable defense and the absolutely penetrative offense. It does both, and it plays both really well. Another Rob Hand quote, Scorpio is the only water sign that wants to fight. Cancer wants to get along. Pisces doesn't even, Pisces is like, oh Lord, let's all just, you are me, I am you, humanity together. And Scorpio is like, I'm going to take you down. It's a very different sign. But there are some shady parts to it. There are some darker, deeper wells, some shadier parts to Scorpio moon that are inescapable. And that stuff may rear its head at this full moon. Full moons bring things out into seeing, into awareness, into vision. They flush things out. When we've got sun and moon right opposite each other, we have the full light of the sun on the moon. In fact, a lot of ancient texts would have called full moons malefic, meaning that they were evil or malevolent or poor, or in some kind of way, or that they were dangerous. Hence why we also got lots of creepy stories about werewolves and things like this, howling at the full moon, that weird things happen in the full moon, etc. But on the astrological level or on the psychological level, the moon's lunar sensibility, which is about what's inside, what's deep, what's internal, what's the stuff that we normally hide away, even from ourselves, is getting full illumination from the sun. Full sight, full clarity, full vision. That's what a full moon is about. So that is my small, not short at all diatribe on why Scorpio is not just about death, sex, and taboos. Also want to put this out there really quick. Scorpio's relationship to sex is because it rules the genitals and the reproductive system. That is the connection to sex. It has nothing to do with the 8th house. It has nothing to do with Pluto. That stuff is things we've kind of made up in the last century about astrology, but we have 2 millennia of history and foundational astrological knowledge that tells us something very different. And also, just for the record, the opposite sign, Taurus, which is supposed to be way more chill, relaxed, wisdom of nature, let things unfold, let's live a beautiful life, signed by, ruled by Venus. All of the following people have Sun in Taurus. And this is very Scorpio of me to go research this and then put it out here. Adolf Hitler, Vladimir Lenin, Saddam Hussein, Pol Pot, Machiavelli, and Timothy McVeigh. Not so chill. Not so chill at all. And this is another aspect about Taurus and Scorpio, and indeed this axis. That's what we call these signs. When two signs are opposing, there's a Taurus-Scorpio axis. And it might help some people understand aspects of the full moon in Scorpio a little bit better. This is an axis about control, which we can clearly see with all these Taurian dictators, oligarchs. Taurus wants to do it more from the perspective of controlling their environment, material, solidifying oneself into a material reality, and feeling comfort and security in that. Scorpio does it very different and much more twisty and dark, admittedly. Scorpio controls others and controls themselves, and they control what that process looks like. That's why some of the touchy stuff is there. It's like, if I see it from a mile away and I think it's problematic, pull back the reins, get into a safe position. Strategy, circle the wagons. There's a whole thing that like unfolds automatically for Scorpio as an automatic defense system. And then it can wait and watch and like, know the exact right thing to say to take somebody down, the exact right way to strike. But that's why Scorpio is also a sign of power, immense power, because they're able to psychically perceive what's happening in a certain space, control as best they can their reaction to it and how they're interacting with it, and then hopefully also have that thing going back and forth with other people too. So two signs of control. Scorpio from the position that more that like knowledge is power, that by seeing and knowing what I see and knowing what's out there, I can fix up my strategy. I can fix up my game plan. I know what's coming. Nobody's going to take me for a fool. That kind of thing. Also known as like, I don't know if Richard Nixon has lots of Scorpio in his chart, but it's a little bit also along the lines of trust but verify. Trust but verify. So other things that I find really interesting about this full moon in Scorpio that don't actually have to do with the sign Scorpio, but with the rest of the chart, which of course, as always, I have in front of me with all of my crazy notes. And this is really interesting to me. We are about halfway between the January, February eclipses and the ones that are about to come up in July, August. And something that I've been talking about quite a lot, some of you would have seen these videos, others maybe not. You can go back and look at them on my YouTube channel. In January 31st, that eclipse, total lunar eclipse, the blood moon eclipse that many of you will remember, Ceres, asteroid Ceres, featured very, very, very strongly in that eclipse. Asteroid Ceres will also feature very, very strongly in the August 11th eclipse. And here we are at like right around the halfway point of these two eclipse events. So something about Ceres is shifting. Our idea of what Ceres is, what her meaning is. Themes that deal with Ceres are mothering, motherhood, our own mothers, and that story of being mothered. Indeed, the attachment to mother and mother figures. Attachment as a whole. Things like codependency come here. Separation and loss. Ideas and fears about anticipated loss. And how that idea of like a future fear may inform and distort our present and how we act. Food. Ceres was goddess of agriculture, goddess of wheat specifically. And a lot of the psychosis, the way that asteroid Ceres presents on the level of psyche can indeed come out physically or visibly as food and food complexes. So things like this are, I'm not getting my needs met, and I don't feel in love or loved, or I don't feel appreciated, I eat. I don't feel satisfied, I find satisfaction in food. I don't feel fulfilled, I find fulfillment in food. And to be very clear, as somebody who has struggled with this kind of stuff off and on my entire life, I don't mean to demonize food. I'm not a believer in the clean eating mantras, and their inherently orthorexic backbone. So it's not about the demonization of food, but indeed it is about studying the ways in which nurturance and food connect, and how self-esteem, self-worth, and our needs circle back in a positive or negative loop attached to food. Surely food and eating is one of the great joys of life. It is. There's not that many that we have, but love is one, romance is one, food is one, sex is one, sleep is one. There's a few really basic human fulfillments, and not even obligations. They're a real pleasure, things that we've been given as real gifts that we get to enjoy. And food is indeed one of them. So there's food for enjoyment and for pleasure, and there's food for punishment. And that is one of the things that I wonder about, or I'm thinking about as we go into the full moon in Scorpio, because the situation we have, and again, interesting, we're somewhere between, almost smack dab between the January 31st eclipse, strongly featured Ceres, August 11th eclipse, strongly featured Ceres. And here we are, full moon in Scorpio, moon in Scorpio square to Ceres, sun in Taurus square to Ceres. Ceres conjunct the North Node in an almost perfect conjunction. So there's something potent here, something powerful, something charged. It could possibly be a tipping point. Quite often when things square the nodes being the past versus the future, what we need more of, what we need to avoid, what will provide growth, what provides comfort, there's seems to be sometimes a feeling when planets square the sun and moon, or square the nodes, that like we're wobbling at a tipping point and it's going to go either way. And I mean, typical things that happen when sun and moon square Ceres are feelings of rejection, feelings of loss or attachment, low self-esteem, low self-worth. I usually call moon square or opposite Ceres kind of needy bones. There's a feeling of like the need to be needed, and if somebody doesn't need me or want me, what am I good for? That kind of thing, real needy bone stuff. And this is going to impact, for sure, Scorpios, sun in Scorpios, ascendant and moon in Scorpios most strongly. Or if you have planets or points in your chart at 8 to 12 degrees of Leo, Taurus, or Aquarius, it's a little bit more touchy. Quite helpful if you have the same degrees of planets in the water signs, Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio. So I feel like this is a continuation, guys, that we're like, I'm always guilty of doing this, singing the Bon Jovi "We're Halfway There" song. I'm so sorry, it's come up again, but I don't know what to do. So we're halfway there. Living on a prayer. Okay, moving on. But we're halfway between these 2 points, and there's something about Ceres, food, survival, nurturance, feel goods, motherhood, what it means to be a mom, what it means to be mothered, what it means to be in that role. All of these things are coming up for exposure, for understanding, for a good clearing out. And that is what I want to stress to you for the full moon in Scorpio. Scorpio is amazing. The full moon in Scorpio is an amazing moment for letting it all out, for facing your deepest, darkest, not very pretty thoughts and feelings and emotions that you have in a certain area. It is absolutely crucial at a full moon in Scorpio, or any kind of lunation or astrological event with Scorpio highly featured, to get real, to get honest, to strip layers away. If there's kind of like any inner cupboard that's been refusing vision or refusing sight, let it open, air it out, let those things out. Quite often, some of the things that Scorpio stuff is like close to the bone stuff. So some of the things that come up are quite often things we greatly fear sharing for fear of rejection. And that is highlighted at this new moon with asteroid Ceres square both sun and moon. So my vibe is let it all hang out. Let it all hang out. Share it. Or what is it, the old saying? Feel the fear and do it anyway. It's more important at this full moon to get honest and brutally honest about how you feel and what's working and what's not. And I think to communicate it and to put that communication out there. In fact, Mercury is in, which is the planet of communication and speech and thought, is in beautiful aspect to asteroid Ceres. So I think nurturing thoughts and words and conversations are very available. Perhaps it's not such a great time or a great moment for what I would call more spiritual pursuits. I think we could go off kind of the spiritual deep end in a kind of way, or have spiritual experiences if you're that way inclined, spiritual experiences at this full moon that are a bit more, could be getting like lost in the deep end, or, feel like we're not grounded in those kind of pursuits. And I think I will call it there. I mean, I could always go on and on and on and on. I've never used one word if I could use three. But this is what I think this full moon in Scorpio is about. It's about release. It's about letting things go. There was a couple touchy aspects in the last few days. April 26th in particular had a Mars-Pluto conjunction, and we're coming off of that. We're at the back tail of that. And some people felt, Mars and Pluto together are quite not very pleasant. They can bring up a lot of rage, a lot of anger, a lot of drive and energy and stamina that maybe doesn't have an outlet or doesn't have anywhere to go. Sometimes we turn that stuff inwards. Sometimes it comes externalized and goes outwards to another person. So you'll know if that has affected you. The days would have been April 24th, 5th, 26th, 27th, right in there. I think, if anything, the full moon in Scorpio is a continuation of that stuff. It's studying the Ceres story, the story about nurturance and food and feeling and needs, both in what are one's needs and how do they get met, and how can they best get met? How comfortable are you with them? Do your needs create a feeling of, or an anxiety about loss or attachment? Is there something that, if you think about the things that you really need, not want, need, can't do without, is there some fluttering that happens? There's some anxiety that comes up. Is there a part of you that thinks you shouldn't have them, don't need them, shouldn't want them? Those are the kind of things that need to be unraveled further as part of this Ceres story, and especially as we kind of wax towards the eclipses of the summer. And it's about finding ways to release that stuff, finding that ways to take, in some ways, the psychic, emotional muck of Scorpio and to let it break down. It's the same kind of methodology behind things like compost. Using things that seemingly are no longer useful, but to allow them to break down into something that's much more rich and fertile than in fact it was before. That's the kind of stuff that this full moon in Scorpio is about. I think that's it, my loves. Thank you guys so much. As always, feel free to ask questions or thoughts and comments about Scorpio if you're a Scorpio yourself. Hopefully you feel touched by some of the words of defense in your honor that I've brought up tonight. And as always, I will see you soon. Next up, I think the next couple of weeks, I'll have pieces on astrology.com about the Neptune retrograde and then the Mars retrograde, which is a big one. That's coming up soon in the summer. And then I hope in the next day or so to get up May transits. So I will have those for you soon. Thanks, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Ciao, ciao.